First of all, as a young officer coming along, you should think about who you admire. Who do you admire? Have you ever really stopped and thought about that? It's a good thing to do. It's obviously personal to everybody. These are some people that I admire a lot. The upper left is my dad. He was in our U.S. Marine Corps. He fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He commanded a regiment in Vietnam. And I'm very proud of him. And I hope you have someone in your family that you are very proud of. In the center there is Madeleine Albright, our Minister of Foreign Affairs for 8 years in the Clinton administration. She's a Czech immigrant to the United States who became our Minister of Foreign Affairs, earned a PhD at Georgetown. She's extraordinarily creative and facile of mind. Upper right, George Marshall, one of our iconic generals. Lower right, you all recognize Bill Gates, right? What I admire about Bill Gates is he went out and made billions of dollars, and since then has devoted his life to improving the world. And that sounds like such a cliche, but in his case, he's doing it in a wide variety of very, as you would expect, creative ways. He's engaging in very positive ways in the world. Admiral Arleigh Burke, naval figure. Arthur Ashe, tennis player from my country, a man of extraordinary grace under pressure. Teddy Roosevelt, one of our presidents. Those aren't particularly important people for any of you, but my point is, as you motor along in this phase of life, it's good to think about who you admire and what you admire about them, because that informs who you are and where you go in this trajectory of your life. Next, please. And you should think about, who am I? I mean, what's my philosophy of life? You are beginning now at this academy to develop a service reputation. It will follow you through your career. And you get a vote on what that is. You get to decide, what kind of qualities do I want to have others see in me? And how do I achieve that? And so on my list, illustrated with a few photos, upper left, my president, my commander-in-chief. I'm very proud of him. I'm proud of him for a lot of reasons, but one particular reason I'm proud of President Obama is that he's very calm. His nickname around the White House is No Drama Obama. That's a good thing. That's a good reputation to have, in my opinion, because I believe the first duty of an officer is to bring order out of chaos, not the other way around. And I have served with too many officers who inject a lot of chaos in the situation, with anger, with short-temperedness, with outbursts. We don't need that. You should strive, in my opinion, to be calm. Upper right, we all ought to be team players. Lower right, surely you recognize him, I hope so. Maybe you're too young to recognize him. He's the greatest tennis player of all time, Australian Rod Laver. He was an extraordinarily creative player. He reinvented the game of tennis. And I believe creativity is something we should strive for in our life. And that dog is all about determination. He's going to get that ball. So those may or may not be the qualities that you value, but my point is, just like that list of heroes, you ought to be thinking about, what are the qualities I want to embody, and strive for those. Make them a habit. And the sooner you do that at this stage of your life, the more natural it will be, and the more it will be part of your service reputation and part of what you contribute to your service and to your nation. Next, please. And you ought to read. You ought to read a lot. We talked about it in the context of Afghanistan. Here's some other books that I think are interesting. Some of them you'll have heard of. Upper right, Neville Shutes on the Beach. I don't know if that's a popular read in Australia or not. It's set in Australia, kind of post-war Australia. It's a fascinating book, and what it's really about is the fundamental decency of people. and particularly of Australians. I often recommend it to people. Next, please. And here's some that I particularly like from Australian literature. You'll recognize some of these. For the Term of His Natural Life, Patrick White, your Nobel laureate, book called Voss, about a collision of cultures, a long walk across the outback. Peter Carey, True History of the Kelly Gang. It's a wonderful read. And again, On the Beach. My point is, you ought to understand and read the literature and the culture from which you come in Australia. It's a proud one. And you also ought to use that ability to read to reach out into the world, to understand other cultures. I've personally been to every state in Australia and both territories over the course of my life. As a naval officer, I've just had a series of great ship visits all around the coast of this country. I became very interested in Australia in the 1980s, long before you were all born. And reading about Australia helped me understand it in ways that I could never have done without access to the literature. So for all of you, carve out time to read. To read a book is to have another life, and you can repeat it again and again and again. Next, please. I would say you should also then think about writing. Not just the writing you're doing for class, but eventually communicate your ideas. Like Admiral Goldrick, who is a very well-known writer and author. The ability to reach out, and I don't mean necessarily articles in journals, although those are a good thing. I'm talking about on blogs and on websites. Get out in that electronic conversation. Many of you are, and that's a good thing. But don't be afraid to share your ideas and your views as you work through the challenges in your life. Next, please. And connect. I'm on Facebook. Friend me. I gave a talk. People ask me sometimes, why are you on Facebook? You're 54 years old. You shouldn't be on Facebook. I'm on Facebook because I want to connect, and I'll give you an example of how it works. I was giving a talk in London at a very posh, very distinguished think tank called RUSI, and it was in an old Brit library, and there were about 100 people there, and I thought, okay, I won't really get a lot out of talking to 100 people, but I'll do this. I was talking about this aspect. I said, and I'm on Facebook, friend me, and nobody in the room even knew what I was talking about. But there was a reporter in the room, and the reporter was an AP reporter, and he wrote just a short little story with a headline that said, NATO commander needs friends. And then it talked about, connecting on Facebook, and I'm on Facebook. Well, the article didn't get picked up in many places in the world. It got picked up. I'm not making this up. It got picked up and published in Finland and in Indonesia. And the next day, I woke up and I had 230 friend requests from Indonesians and Finns, and particularly the Indonesians were saying, Admiral, I know you need friends, and what is NATO?